Dead killers, rising from the dead, thanks to a witch's curse. This sums up the plot of Fear Street 1994. This movie is the first of a horror trilogy, all of which I will eventually recap in this channel. So, stay tuned to catch the entirety of this epic trilogy. The movie is set in the year 1994, and it opens with a bookstore inside a mall located in a small town called Shadyside. Heather works as a cashier there, and she just checked out her last customer for the day.
And have a nice night.
She is just about to close up the bookstore when she receives a call from her friend, Ryan, who works at a Halloween shop in the same mall. However, in the middle of the call, Ryan suddenly disconnects, prompting the confused Heather to walk outside the store to look for him.
Hello, Ryan.
She is shocked to see the janitor, Martin. Ryan then appears from behind, shocking her. Heather asks Ryan if she could hitch a ride home for the night and Ryan agrees, but he says she needs to wait a bit because he has to close up the Halloween shop. But then, as the two part ways, Ryan hears a whisper calling his name, but Heather says she didn't say anything. Later, just as Heather is almost finished closing up the bookstore, a book suddenly falls from the shelf across from her and she goes to investigate. Suddenly, a figure dressed in a Halloween skull mask costume moves to stab her, but luckily she blocks the knife with a book. Heather runs for her life and makes a dash to the Halloween shop, hoping to find Ryan. She calls 911 for help, but she is forced to leave the phone, because Skull Mask has discovered her whereabouts. She runs and tries to sneak away. As Heather runs away, she finds that the killer has already killed a few people in the mall. But in the end, she gets caught. She crawls on the floor and struggles to escape despite having been stabbed on the chest. And she unmasks the killer in the process. As it turns out, it is Ryan. Fortunately, Ryan gets shot in the head by Nick Goode, the county sheriff. But it is too late for Heather as she chokes to death on her own blood next to Ryan. The film's intro then starts, showing us that Ryan killed 8 people in total that night, and there are 2 towns that are relevant in this trilogy. One is called Shadyside, while the other is called Sunnyvale. Every few decades or so, a killing spree would happen in Shadyside, and the town's socioeconomic condition is always bad in general. Especially when compared to Sunnyvale, a town that always seems to be thriving. In the next scene, a young girl, Dina, is shown trying to write a letter to her ex, Sam. Dina then goes downstairs where her brother, Josh, who is a horror and mystery nerd, is chatting in an online forum about the killing spree that occurred last night in their town, Shadyside. Josh and the person he's chatting with on the forum agree that Sarah Fier, the infamous Shadyside witch, is back for revenge again. A few moments later, Dina gets him off the computer and they get into an argument. It turns out that Josh has been doing some research into the killings in his town. Plus, he also owns an article about the one-handed witch, Sarah Fier. The two then head to school, where the recent news about the skull-masked serial killer is buzzing, and Heather turns out to be Dina's school friend. People are joking that the town's infamous witch, Sarah Fier, is back. Dina, along with her best friends Kate and Simon, meet in the bathroom, where Kate announces that she decided to start dealing drugs again. In fact, her drugs once killed Simon's brother Timothy, though luckily, they managed to bring him back to life. Because of the recent killing spree, the 3 along with the rest of Shadyside High School's band, cheer, and football team members head to Sunnyvale to participate in a vigil, to honor those killed in the killing spree last night. It is clear as they arrive at Sunnyvale that the buildings there are a lot nicer compared to the ones at Shadyside.
As a neighbor, and yes.
At the vigil, Dina sees Sam, her ex, and she is jealous to find that Sam is dating someone else. Overwhelmed, Dina finds a place so she can be alone. But as it turns out, Sam follows her there. They begin fighting about their breakup, which is caused by Sam moving to Sunnyvale because her parents got divorced. Dina, however, is convinced that Sam is using that as an excuse to hide from who she really is, because it isn't easy being a lesbian in 1994. As the two fight, Sam's new boyfriend, Peter, suggests that they burn down Shadyside. and the tension is brewing between the Shadysiders and Sunnyvalers at the vigil. As a result, a fight breaks out between the high schoolers of the two towns. After the fight, on the bus ride home, a car approaches behind them and one of its passengers begins throwing bottles at the bus. It turns out that Sam is in the car, looking horrified and begging her boyfriend, Peter, to stop harassing the Shadysiders. Riled up because of the fight at the vigil earlier, Dina and Kate get ready to throw out the contents of a cooler down at the car. The car crashes in the woods, leaving Sam dizzy and attempting to recalibrate herself after the crash. She crawls out of the car, and her nose is bleeding too. And then, when her bloody palm hits the ground, Dina comes to her aid, looking worried and remorseful. Simon and Kate also come rushing to her to make sure she's alright. Sam then chokes out blood, staining Simon's shirt and Dina's shoe. Later on, the ambulance arrives and Sam gets rushed to the hospital while the rest of teens get questioned by Nick Goode, the county sheriff. But being the bratty teens they are, none of them is willing to admit what actually happened.
We lost control, sir.
Before parting ways, Peter threatens Dina.
He's totaled. You are all fucking dead.
On the next night, Dina is back home in Shadyside, where she sees the news covering the killing spree at the mall. She learns that Ryan Torres was the killer, and that he was shot dead that very night. Suddenly, she hears the doorbell rings and goes to answer it, only to find a figure wearing the skull mask costume standing across her yard. She's convinced that it's Peter, and goes back inside. Kate is right next door, babysitting two kids while telling them to put drugs into tiny bags to help her business. Simon is there too, still wearing the same clothes from last night, which is covered in Sam's blood. Kate tells him it's disgusting, so he takes his shirt off. She then receives a call from Dina, who informs her that Peter is roaming about in a skull mask costume to mess with them. Not long after, Kate and Simon hear the sound of a window breaking, so they go to investigate.
What the
They find the figure in the skull mask costume holding Simon's shirt before exiting the house again. Simon's shirt is now covered in holes. Realizing that they have to do something about this, Simon and Kate decide to hand the kids over to Mrs. Lane, who lives nearby. They then visit Dina's house to tell her what just happened. At this point, they decide that this has gone too far, so they go straight to the hospital to confront Sam. Despite the visiting hours being over, they get access to Sam, thanks to Nurse Betty, who is Kate and Simon's drug supplier. Dina comes up to Sam and starts yelling about how fucked up of a prank it is that her boyfriend, Peter, is pulling on them. However, Sam seems surprised and completely unaware of what's going on, and tries telling Dina that Peter has been at the hospital the whole time. Peter then comes into the room and watches the two girls argue.
Covering for him. He's a bad guy, Sam. You're out of control.
When suddenly,
have a nice goddamn life.
Skull Mask appears, and the two girls rush away from the room and pour into the halls. Dina sees Kate, Simon and Josh and tells them to run. Dina and Sam move to hide behind the receptionist table while Simon, Kate and Josh fetch the car. They find the receptionist dead behind the counter, and the killer moves to stab Nurse Betty on the throat. Sam screams and the two struggle against the killer, knocking his mask off in the process. Well, I'm not sure what's going on because the killer turns out to be Ryan Torres, the mall killer. Dina is shocked and make a dash with Sam into an ambulance that Simon apparently stole, and the teens drive away. On the other side of town, Martin, the mall janitor, is behind bars, and Sheriff Nick Goode is accusing him of vandalizing the mall's walls, because he claims to have found spray paint cans in Martin's possession. Martin denies this accusation and seems really pissed when Sheriff Goode leaves. Sam and Dina arrive at the police station, and are trying to report what just happened to Officer Kopinski, but he won't believe them because Ryan Torres is supposed to be dead by now. They then try to convince Nick Goode, but he won't believe them either. Outside the police station, Simon announces to his friends that he's going to take a piss. After finishing his business, Simon hears the sound of a lady singing, and goes to approach her. Realizing that the police officers aren't going to help them, Dina lunges at Officer Kopinski, pretending to lash out at him for his unwillingness to help them, when in reality, she's stealing his gun. Back to Simon, it turns out that the lady is holding a shaving knife, and she moves to attack Simon with it. Simon struggles against her in the middle of the street, until Dina appears and shoots the lady a couple times. The teens make a run for it when they realize that the lady gets back up right after. They return to Dina's house to process what's going on, until Simon mentions that the lady attacked him with an old-timey razor blade. After hearing this, Josh starts to realize something. He begins showing them old articles that he collects of Shadyside serial killers over the years. The one who attacked Simon was Ruby Lane, who went on a killing spree before slashing her own wrists and bled to death 30 years ago. It is at this point that Josh begins to show them all of the killers who have left their mark on Shadyside's history. 1978, Masked Killer at Camp Nightwing.
1950, Harry Rooker. 1922, Billy Barker. 1904, Grifter Guts Girls.
And the first one recorded, Pastor Miller, 1666. Overwhelmed, Sam moves away from the room. Dina follows her and they make peace with each other. In the other room, Josh explains that the witch, Sarah Fier, is turning people into serial killers to take vengeance on the town for executing her for witchcraft back in 1666. The urban legend says that before her death, Sarah Fier cuts off her cursed hand, and this allows her to keep her curse upon the land. Josh is convinced that the urban legend is true, and Kate points out that what's happening to them right now is different from the killing sprees in the past, because now the dead killers are rising from their grave to specifically go after them. Sam then turns up and tells them that all of this is probably because she saw visions of the witch the night of the accident. The teens decide to investigate the spot where Sam had her accident last night, and they discover that it is Sarah Fier's grave. They conclude that all of this is happening because Sam disturbed Sarah Fier's grave, so they try to put all the bones back into place. But then Sam has a nosebleed again. Meanwhile, Josh is keeping watch while the rest of the group are arranging the bones. But then, the Camp Nightwing killer passes by Josh, and goes straight towards Sam. The teens then rush back inside the car and drive away. While panicking, they try to discuss how to put an end to this curse so the undead killers would stop chasing them. Sam tells them that her most recent vision revealed to her that the killers are not coming after the group, but is only after her. The reason why the killers go after Simon and Dina too, is because Simon is still wearing the shirt with Sam's blood vomit, and Dina is wearing the shoe that also has Sam's blood on it. With this knowledge, the teens come up with a new plan that involves putting Sam as the bait. They then go to the school and part ways to change into clean clothes so that they won't have Sam's blood on them anymore. Afterwards, they reconvene to execute the plan.
The trap is... The killers go to the blood.
Dina, Simon, Kate, and Josh wait for the killers outside on the halls while Sam hides inside the bathroom. Not long after, Skull Mask, Ruby Lane, and Camp Nightwing Killer arrive one by one and they enter the bathroom. Meanwhile, Sam already makes her escape through the vent. The teens lock the bathroom door, and detonates the explosives inside. They re-enter the bathroom afterwards to admire their handiwork, but then... That's right, the undead killers are coming back to life again and the teens run and hide inside a classroom. They are now out of ideas. Josh tries to reanalyze the newspaper articles again to find what he missed, while the rest of the group argues. Despite Dina's objections, Sam decides to sacrifice herself. She moves outside to the halls and gets ready for the killers to get her.
Help me! Help!
In this state of panic, Josh has finally figured it out. It turns out that back in 1978, a woman named C. Berman claimed she saw the witch, and she was the only survivor of the Camp Nightwing massacre. Dina tries calling C. Berman's landline but only connected to voicemail, and Dina asks how Berman survived the killer's attack.
There, please pick up. Please.
Sam then tries reading the news article again, and discovers that it says that C. Berman died for a few minutes, before the medics managed to bring her back to life. As a result, they have now found the true solution. The only way to save Sam is to kill her, and then bringing her back to life. To escape the killers who are pounding on the classroom door, they jump out of the classroom window, and head to the grocery store Simon works at. On the other side of town, Sheriff Goode walks toward a house, and slips in an ominous note. The teens arrive at the grocery store and they plan to reenact what happened to Simon's brother, Timothy, which is to kill Sam by getting her to overdose on drugs, and then bring her back to life with an EpiPen. Josh, Simon, and Kate then smear Sam's blood all over themselves, so they can distract the killers while they wait for Sam to overdose and die. The teens split up inside the grocery store, while Dina stays with Sam to help her take the drugs. And so, it begins. Sam takes the drugs, while the others walk around in suspense. Dina tries to assist Sam in swallowing all of the pills, but Sam ends up vomiting up all of the medications she has taken. Luckily, Kate is there to save the day. Dina and Sam make a dash to escape. Realizing they're out of time, Dina comes across a lobster tank and comes up with an alternative idea. Meanwhile, Kate goes to hide. But Skull Mask manages to find her. She struggles to escape his grip. He then runs her head through the bread slicer, effectively shredding her head to pieces and killing her. Inside the storage room, Ruby Lane finds Simon. Luckily, Simon manages to escape. In one of the aisles, Camp Nightwing Killer finds Josh and begins moving to attack him. Dina and Sam are by the lobster tank, and Dina's plan is to drown Sam. Josh and Simon are still running. They pause in horror when they find Kate's brain scrambled to bits. And then, Josh runs for his life as he is now the only bait left alive. Meanwhile, Dina is still trying to drown Sam. Josh falls to the floor, and Skull Mask is ready to stab him, while Camp Nightwing Killer and Ruby Lane approach Dina and Sam from different sides, until the killers finally disappear. Josh and Dina are safe, and Sam is dead. Josh and Dina rush to resurrect Sam by injecting multiple EpiPens on her chest, but Sam wouldn't wake up. Dina begins performing CPR on her chest. Fortunately, Sam has now come back to life. Dina holds her tightly in relief. The next morning, they get interviewed at the police station by Sheriff Goode, who of course is skeptical of what occurred. They make up a story about being at the grocery store at night when a killer they didn't see suddenly attacked them, and killed Simon and Kate. Afterwards, while Josh and Sam wait for Dina, they come across Martin the janitor, who asks Josh to help him escape. Josh decides to hand him a paperclip to break free from his handcuffs. Martin thanks him by giving Josh his business card. Meanwhile, Sam's mom is waiting for them as they exit the police station. She clearly dislikes Dina, but given the life and death situation they've been through, Sam has now realized that there's no point in hiding anymore. Later that night, Sam and Dina are hanging out at Dina's place, right when Dina receives a phone call from none other than C. Berman, the survivor of the Camp Nightwing massacre. C. Berman tells her that there's no way to defeat the witch, and that it's not over because the witch makes the rules.
She'll do whatever not safe.
Inside an ominous cave, Sam's name appears under Ryan Torres' name. Dina then turns around and finds Sam with her eyes empty. Sam stabs her in the abdomen, and Dina falls to the floor. Meanwhile, Josh is in the basement listening to loud music, and chatting on the internet while Dina is fighting for her life. Later, Josh realizes someone entered the room and turns around. Turns out it is Dina. Before the film ends, she brings Josh upstairs to show that Sam is now tied up, and is now possessed by an evil entity. Dina promises to get her back, and the movie ends with a note saying to be continued.